Have you ever started working on a quilt top and you have your pattern and you suddenly realize that you've got a directional fabric and it doesn't work? Well, today we're going to show you how to avoid that. Keep watching. Hi, it's Fran Morgan with Fabric Cafe, and today we are going to deep dive into directional fabric. Now, I know I have done this, and I'm sure you can relate as well. You get into a quilt pattern, you're working on it, you're so excited about it, and then suddenly it's like, it's a directional fabric and all of them are upside down. So today we're going to talk about that. So let's get started first and identify the 3 different directions that fabric has. So the first one is a tossed fabric. Now we call it tossed because the design on the fabric goes all different directions. So if you hold it this way, you'll see that some of the cars are upside down, some of them are sideways, some of them are upright. Now if I were to turn this bolt around, you can see it's the exact same way. So the pattern on the fabric is all different directions and you can turn it all different ways. This is a safe fabric to use in any position on the quilt, so it's perfect. Now, our second fabric is a one-way directional fabric. Now, let's talk about this just a little bit. These are darling little cats here. And as you can see that there is a definite bottom and a definite top to the cats. So if you were to take this fabric and turn it upside down like this, all of your cats would be standing on their head. So this is a one-directional fabric, and it's going to take a very specific block and how it's made in order to use this fabric. And we'll get into that a little bit more in just a moment. Okay, so now let's look at our third type of directional fabric. The third type of directional fabric is one of my favorites. It's the stripe. Now, the stripe obviously goes in a direction, but it looks the same if you do it this way or if you turn it 180. You can see that the stripe still looks equally as good. This type of directional fabric has a little bit more flexibility and can go in a few more types of blocks. Okay, so now we've identified our 3 directions of fabric. Let's actually look at a quilt and some fabric so that we can identify how it's placed in the quilt. This pattern is our stepping stones pattern. This is a fabulous one. It's very popular around here. We really love using it. Now we have a block here that's just a single block. There is no assembly on this block. And then we have our stepping stone pattern that has a little bit of assembly. So let's put this on the table, look at our fabric, and I've got some pieces and parts for you. Okay, so when we're making our stepping stones pattern, the first thing we want to know, of course, is can we use a directional fabric? So the first thing is we're going to pull out our pattern and we're going to determine if the quilt has a block that needs any assembly. So that's the question you're asking. Does it need assembly, or is it just a block that's just a plain square that you cut? So of course all of the cutting instructions are going to be here, so you can determine that. And you see here we have some illustrations for assembling the block. This means no, we can't turn the fabric. But when we look over here and we look for block A, the first block, like this one here, this block is just a square. It is just cut in a plain square and then assembled. That means you can use a one-direction fabric. So if you have those kitties, they won't be standing on their head. Now let's pull our fabric over here and look at this so that you can see what we're talking about. So we have these darling daisies here, and we have a block cut for you. Now these daisies have a definite direction. And I know that it's not maybe as obvious as the cats that we showed earlier, but they have a stem below and the daisy on top. So if it were upside down, so if I were to take this and turn this, it would probably be pretty obvious in the quilt if they all went different directions. Now, that's definitely preference, and if you like that, please do that. But for this case, in this video to teach, we're seeing that we can use a one-direction fabric in the stepping stones pattern in this particular block. There's no assembly and there's no piecing, no turning. Perfect for a directional fabric. Okay, our alternate block on this is a joined block. Now, isn't this the cutest thing ever? I just love it. Here, we'll do this right here so that you can see how this goes. Now this block here, our alternate block, is actually assembled. So if you were to take your daisy fabric and use it in this one, it'll be turned around, and so it's going to be on its head. So it won't work as well as it would in the main block here. So this one's not assembled and sewn together, so it's perfect for directional fabric. Okay, let's look at the fabric on this. We have our very cute daisies. These are just like springtime, and it's kind of fun and funky for a daisy. I like it. It will go in this main block here. Everywhere the white, red poppies is where the daisies will go. Then our number 2 fabric, as you can see from our block here, will be our background. So everywhere the red dot is on the stepping stones is where the white will be. And then our 3rd fabric is this fun kind of cross-hatch black. It's kind of a tone-on-tone. That will be our stones, and it is everywhere the black is. So the 2 and the 3 fabrics are not directional, so you can use them in any place, and it works perfectly for this quilt. Now, special bonus for you, a little surprise, I've got a great rendering on the screen so that you can see how that looks, and it comes together so darling. I love the black and white. It's such a classic color combination, and the daisy just gives it such a fun little quirk there. So the kit information on this one is Daisy Delight. The number is 8022592. It is our stepping stones pattern from the Pretty Darn Quick book. Okay, now let's look at our next example of using directional fabric. Our next quilt that we're going to talk about is bold blocks. Now this is a great pattern. We love it. We love it because it's a big block quilt, because that's one thing, but we also love it because it kind of has a 2-sided border here on the block. And that is a perfect place for directional fabric. So let's talk about that. So the next question that we're asking ourselves, is it a strip of fabric that is cut, that is sewn to the side of a block, that is not in a strip assembly? Now, that might be a little confusing for you, so I'm going to step through and explain what I mean by that. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do, like I said before, is we're going to pull out the pattern. So we're going to look at the pattern to see how it's made. So the first thing is we have a single block that is cut in a square that is not assembled, and we're going to work from there. So this big block that's on the quilt can use a directional fabric, and you can cut that and turn it whatever direction you need. Now the second one is we're going to be sewing strips to the sides of this block. This is a perfect place to use a directional fabric like a stripe, because we're sewing it to the edges here. So we've got some examples here, some pieces and parts, and hopefully that will help it be even more clear for you. Okay, this is a fun kit too, so we're going to get to that as well. Okay, now as I mentioned, we have a fabric here that is a 1-direction fabric. We're going to cut a square from that fabric, and you can see that these kitties definitely have a direction, or maybe I should say cool cats. These are some cool cats. These cool cats have a definite direction. They're playing their instruments, and there's a bottom and there's a top. So this is how the block will be positioned whenever you're working on it. Now the second step is we're going to be taking this block that's cut independently, and then we're going to sew some strips to 2 sides. Now as you can see, there's one strip. This is a directional fabric. And then we're going to sew our second strip. This is a directional fabric. Now these have our seam allowances on them, so they're a little off, but because it is not put together in a strip assembly, it is just sewn to the edges. That makes the perfect place for a stripe. Now, our background fabric, let's put this here and here. Now, you could technically use this in a directional fabric as well, although it might get a little busy. But using that 3rd color to just rest your eye with all the other prints is perfect for this. So that's exactly how this works. So remember, the rule is if you're sewing strips to the side of a block, you can use a 2-directional fabric. All right, let's look at the kit for this because it's darling, darling, darling. We have our cool cats here playing music in their band, and it's just so much fun. They've got guitars and drums, and they're all decked out ready to go to the party. I think they're just absolutely darling. As you can see, that is our focus fabric in our number 1 position. And then we have our red, and the red is just a plain fabric, not a directional, has this great textural kind of print on it. Then that's in our number 2 position, which is back here. And then our number 3, that fun stripe, is our number 3 fabric that borders the block on 2 sides. The name of this kit is Garage Band. The number is 8023104. The pattern is bold blocks from the book Pretty Darn Quick. Now we have another example using the same rule. So let me show you the quilt and we'll explain that. This quilt is our Lickity Split quilt. Now this is a fun, fast quilt. We've got these great vertical rows here with our 2 fabrics here, and this is great for double focus, and then a sashing piece that we sew in here. So this sashing piece is where we would use that 2-directional fabric, like a stripe. Let's put this on the table and let me explain that a little further. Okay, Lickity Split is from our Fast and Fun book. And I want to just open this up and show you, because remember, the first thing you want to do when determining if you can do the pattern with the directional fabric is look at the pattern, see how it's made. We're going to look at our strips here and how it's built. Now this particular quilt is really great because we have actually written for fabric 1 and 2 to be directional, because we're doing strip assemblies here, but we do a second strip assembly so you don't have to turn these rows. So this is an exception, and I'm sure if you read through the pattern you would see how that works. But we are talking about this sashing, so let's talk about this. As you can see, our fabric 3 here in the pattern is just a strip of fabric that is turned sideways. What a perfect place for a stripe. So let's get our fabric and our pieces and parts so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Now remember, our rule that we were saying is no strip piecing on our directional fabric. Now, Lickity Split's a little bit of an exception just because of the way that these vertical rows are made, but we are focusing on the sashing at this point. So I'm going to put this down just for the concept, because like I said, this is strip pieced and not done this way. I'm just doing it for effect. Here is our sashing piece, and we have used a stripe. Now, once this whole column of squares are put together, we're then going to put these vertical rows in between with a sashing strip. This sashing strip is a directional fabric, and you can see how perfectly when you turn it this way and you cut it off of your 1-yard piece, it is perfectly placed, the stripe, so it really gives a lot of interest. Now this same principle applies on borders. So we do it all the time on borders and we never even really think about it. So here's our border. Once again, directional fabric. I'm going to put this just like this so that you can see how fantastic this looks. And you can see, once again, this is a directional fabric, not in a strip assembly that we've used for our sashing, and it works perfectly in the quilt. So our gorgeous fabric here. Now you can see as I laid it out here, it's going to look amazing because we have these beautiful lilies here, and I just think it's this bold, yummy print with all of these colors, and it works perfectly in our column of rectangles. And then our number 2 is this perfect green. Now the green is great against this bold print because it's a textural tone on tone, gives your eye a place to rest. Then we have our number 3, which is our stripe and our directional fabric, and it picks up the greens and the blues and adds the perfect look to our quilt. Love this quilt, absolutely gorgeous. The name of this one is Carolina Lilies, the number 8022577. The name is Lickity Split from the book Fast and Fun. Okay, so our next rule of thumb for directional fabric is it in a strip assembly that is not turned? So I'm going to show you a quilt and give you some examples of that. So our quilt that we're going to be working with here, and isn't it lovely, is called Easy Patch. Now this is a fun 4-patch quilt that goes together really quickly, and it is made in big 4 patches. So let's get this up on the table and I'll explain what I mean about turning those strip assemblies and rows and units. So as always, the first thing we're going to do is go to our pattern. So on our patterns, we do strip assemblies often. And one of the things that we do is we indicate, of course, fabric 1 as a little dot, fabric 2 as a white, and fabric 3 as the black. So our first strip assembly has the black on top and the white on the bottom. So you know this is made with fabric 3 and fabric 2. We then cut a unit off. And whenever we take this unit over to the block assembly, you're going to see that the black is still on top and the white is still on the bottom. And it says Unit A. Now if you look at Unit B, you can see it's the same. This is the number 1 fabric, which is the dot and the black. You cut your unit, you move it over here, and you can see that the dot is still on top, and it just says Unit B. Now, if these were rotated, it would say, I've got an example over here that I want to show you. So here's another quilt pattern, and you can see here, once again, is our strip assembly made with our fabric 2 and 3. And it's cut off with the number 2 on top. When we come over here to block assembly, you see here that we have Unit A. It is not rotated, it's still showing the exact same way it's made. But right here it says Unit A rotated. This is what we want to avoid in this case. So this particular one would not work with a one directional because it is rotated. What I mean is, you see how the black is on top instead of on the bottom? That's because we've turned it 180 degrees. All right, let's get back to our Easy Patch pattern here so that we can see a better example, because sometimes I know it's easier for me to see it than to hear it explained. So when we make our Easy Patch, we are going to do strip assemblies just like the pattern has pointed out. And you can see here that we have our cute little focus fabric, our little monkeys. This is a directional fabric. We don't want them upside down on their heads. And then our number 2. And then when we cut this, it's going to be just like this. Now I'm going to show you on the diagram. So on the diagram right here, we have our white indicating our number 2 and our dot indicating our monkeys. When we come over here and we build the block, you see that the dot is still on the bottom and it does not say rotated. So that means we can use our monkeys. So let's come over here, and here we have this beautiful pink with this larger floral. That's where our focus goes. It's going to be just like that. Now we're going to build our units the same way with the other ones. Let me grab them here. And then here is our second unit that we're going to build our 4 patch with. And then here is our third. Now this is just, would be half a 4 patch because we put these together in these big blocks. Now because these aren't turned, it's going to work. And you can see that we have a directional here and a tossed, which means it's going all different direction, and a tossed, meaning it can go any direction. And it's going to be darling. So let's look at our fabric. All right, I just love these monkeys. I think they're the cutest things, and such bright colors. And what child doesn't love bright colors? What adult doesn't love bright colors? But this is, of course, our number 1, and it works perfect with our Easy Patch pattern. Super cute. And then just to carry on our fun party is these balloons as our number 2. And then this fun purple that, of course, picks up the purple in the balloon in the number 2, and the purple in the monkeys as the number 3 fabric. It's so cute. I just love it. All right, the information on this one is Party Animals. The number is 8023105, and it is Easy Patch pattern. Okay, now we have a fun exception to our rule that we just talked about. So let's look at our next pattern and give some examples on how to use directional fabric. So this is our So Quick pattern, and this one's so popular. Maybe that's what we should call it. But it is so super quick. We do have a 4 patch here, and as you can see, we have that 2 directional fabric here, a nice bold tossed floral, and a nice dot. So we have some really great fabric that we're going to show you and talk about how to put it in this quilt. Okay, so as always, our first step is to go to the pattern and let's look at it. Now this is actually the pattern that I compared to just a moment ago in our other quilt. And you can see that we've got our strip assembly put together here with our fabric 2 and 3. and we have one of the units that is not rotated because it doesn't say, and then our second unit that is. Now this rule, what we're talking about here is how you can take a two-directional fabric like a stripe and you can turn it. And as long as it is turned 180 degrees in a strip from a strip assembly, it will work. So this is a perfect example of that. Now let me also mention too that So Quick uses a single block that is cut and not assembled, so you can use a one-directional fabric in this one. And of course you would know that by reading the cutting instructions on that. So let's look at the pieces and parts for this. Okay, so here is our first block, and as you can see, there's no assembly, it's just a square, perfect for directional fabric. We're going to lay this over here. Now this is not a directional fabric, but you certainly could use one. Love this fabric. Very bohemian looking. Okay, then we are going to be doing our strip assembly. So I'm just going to leave that folded like that, and you're going to see here how we have used, and this is the coolest thing ever. Our number 2 is the green, and it is a directional fabric that we've used in our strip assembly. Our number 3 is a stripe. It's a two-directional. We've also used it in our strip assembly. So we've just sewn our strips together, we cut our unit off, and we're going to cut a bunch of these units. Now remember what I said, if it's a two-directional fabric like a stripe, as long as you're turning it 180 degrees, it will still work. So let's put this on our quilt, and you can see how that stripe is still going the same direction. And here. And it will be lovely. Just love it. Now, these are a bunch of rules, and it is just a great tutorial to be able to see how to use your directional fabric here. And I think this is a great example of using that stripe, that two-directional fabric. So let's look at the quilt kit for this. Here is our great mandalas on this beautiful peach with all of the jade greens in here. This is our fabric 1. This will be the big block. Then our fabric 2 is this great green that picks up all the greens in here. It is the directional that will work, and it will be in our 4-patch. And then our secondary, our number 3, which is our second two-directional fabric, our stripe, will also be in the 4-patch. Is this not a great stripe? You know what's really cool is this is also going to go right here. And won't that be beautiful? Love it on the border. So it is just going to be a great quilt when it's done. Oh, and I have an image on the screen so that you can see how great that's going to look and how fabulous these directional fabrics work in this pattern. So let's get you the quilt kit information so you can get this in your stash. It is called Twirling Treasures. The number is 8022599. It is the So Quick pattern from our Quilt Favorites book. So I hope you learned some great tips on picking patterns for directional fabric. Now, if you have used directional fabric in a pattern, I'd love to hear which pattern is your favorite for that. Now, one more little bonus that we have for you. We have a brand new free goodie sheet that has our top 10 favorite patterns for using directional fabric. So be sure to go to our website, fabriccafe.com, go to the free goodies tab, and download that sheet free to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it. This is Fran Morgan with Fabric Cafe.